Do you want to create more engaging lessons with faster skill progression, higher rates of learning that are maybe even more fun too? In this Tech Talk, Christa Ross guides us on how to use our technical knowledge to allow our teaching and people skills to flourish. She shows us how to guide your students' focuses, ask better questions beyond the old "how'd that feel?" and create better, more interactive learning environments that allow them to experiment, explore, and reflect upon their experiences and sensations to help them get immediate feedback, and through that, potentially even self-coach. Please enjoy this episode of Okemo Tech Talks, brought to you by the Okemo Ski Ride School.
All right, so we're going to start here. We're going to play a game, and there are 2 rounds, and I'm going to ask you if it is possible for you to do this, so not if you're driving, to stand up. Everybody stand up. Sorry, we're going to look at everybody's chest here for a little while, but it's the best we can do. All right, so for round 1 of this game, I want you to transfer all your weight to one leg or the other. I want you to take your other leg. I want you to make it light and pull it up so it is off the floor. You may have to flex the leg that you're standing on. Hold your arms out for balance. Try not to wobble. And now I want you to stand this way for 10 seconds, starting right now. All right, you can put your foot down. That was round 1. You all stood on one foot. Great job. All right, round 2. I am going to ask you some questions as we do this. And I know that you can't answer me, so I want you to sort of answer them in your own head and remember some of these answers so we can talk a little bit afterwards. So I am going to ask you to stand on one foot. Now, what is the first thing that you notice? Did you pick the same foot or a different foot, and why? Where do you feel tension or movement? I want you to try looking forward and then down and now up. Did anything change with those? What happens if you adjust your arm position? Are some easier or harder? All right, you can put your foot down and you can sit back down. All right, so you can talk or you can chat, whichever is easier for you. But I would like to know, when we did the different rounds, which one do you think you learned more about how to stand on one foot? The second one. All right. Anybody have some thoughts about why the second one was better than the first one?
Well, because you played first and you figured it out for the second one.
Okay. So you were able to sort of make some changes as we were playing with it?
Yeah.
Yep. And kind of figure out what made things work. Somebody said we were focused, we were prepped. That's right. We got engaged in that. All right. Do you think that everyone in our group came to the exact same answers in their head as I was asking you questions? I see a couple people shaking out, so probably not, right? Somebody said somebody was more aware, balanced, flexed. Yeah. No, probably not. And that's really actually a very good thing because we're all different. We all carry our weight differently. We all have different strengths. And so we all came to our own understanding of how to stand on one foot by experimenting with it, right? And so the things that we're doing here really was the difference between teaching and coaching. So when we're talking about teaching, when I came into the first round, I knew what we were going to do. I already planned it in my head before I ever got on this call. I was going to tell you to do this, 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 and this. And even if I was standing in front of you on the snow, this was only one way. I was telling you, you were doing what I asked you to do. It's a very formal process. It's primarily focuses on building those skills. So this would be good for our red and our yellow lessons. Although I will argue that we could do coaching even in those levels. But it is definitely where somebody has no knowledge coming in how to do it. And all the feedback that people are getting is either delayed or it's external. So we do it and I say, hey, that was good. You stood on one foot. I told you you did a good job. You now know you did a good job. There was all coming from me in this situation. On the other hand, the second round was the better example of coaching. In that situation, I had you stand on one foot, but everything you decided to do was based on your own choice. I didn't tell you how to do it. I just gave you the choice to do it. And if we were standing face to face, I was asking questions. And while you were answering them in your own mind, if we were standing together, you would answer them for me. We would have a conversation about what you just discovered there. And I might be able to adapt to what we do. So if you found one thing worked better than the other, we could change it a little bit and say, okay, we're going to do that more. Generally, coaching is focused on refining skills that are already in existence. So maybe not the absolute beginner. When the feedback you're getting is immediate. You knew whether you got better balance or worse balance as we did it. I didn't have to tell you if that worked or didn't. You could feel that. Make sense? So when we add interactive to this, we end up with a definition that I just pulled from somewhere on the internet that looks kind of like this: a student-centered approach that emphasizes collaboration, engagement, discovery-based learning rather than one-way instruction. Instead of simply telling students what to do, interactive coaching guides them to explore, analyze, adjust their movements through questioning, feedback loops, and self-assessment. It's a long definition, but more importantly, when we look at this as the way we teach with PSIA and AASI, we start to see that that definition falls under just about everything we do with our teaching. So starting right off with our learning connection model, we are student-centered. Our people skills fundamental talk about that two-way communication and about developing trust. Our teaching skills fundamentals, we're collaborating on goals, we're promoting experimentation, we're adapting to our learner, we are facilitating reflection, we're managing the activities. And then our teaching and learning styles, we're really talking about guided discovery and focusing on the different teaching and learning styles. So that definition of interactive coaching is exactly what we are trying to do, PSIA and AASI, get it for teaching with our instructors. So why would we want to do this? Well, I mean, besides the obvious that that's what we are striving to, we have our students are more engaged, they learn faster, they remember more, and frankly, it's far more fun for them and for us. And so it's a good reason that we want to work on this concept of how we can develop to be better interactive coaches. So I'm going to start off with some of the strategies we can use for interactive coaching. And right at the start, we're talking about our students. We said we are student-centered, and we want to find out what they want out of their lesson. We know that we want to find their goals, and we need to go beyond just what do you want to do today? That's usually that question that we ask at the beginning. Hey, what do you want to learn today? And we end up with pretty generic answers a lot of the time. So one of the things we want to start to do is ask questions that we can start to pinpoint and get very specific. So instead of what do you want to do today, questions like what would success look like for you? Or what is the one thing you want to improve on today? Or when do you feel confident, or when do you feel least confident? So when we start talking to them about their goals for the day, if we can get specific with our questions, it will lead to a better understanding of what their ultimate goal is. Then next step is we have to be willing to give up some control. And we need to get comfortable with the idea of not planning the lesson ahead. And one of the ways we can do that is have some strategies to figure out where we want to start. And so I'm not going to go into them in too much detail, We certainly start by asking them, but we can take it a bit further. And there are a few resources that you might want to go back to and take a look at. The first one is a first chair podcast, purposeful warm-ups to start your day. That's Angela Ross did that one. And I've stolen a lot of this stuff. So so he describes the start of his day as runs that get people focused on what they're doing. He asked them to take an inventory of what they're doing, to make some observations as they ski down the hill. And it's usually a multi-step process, but what we get from that is insight into what our student is thinking. And I have found that this is a great way to dig into what their focus is. You learn about what problems they seem to be having, about injuries. They'll usually tell you about that. What makes them concerned when they're out there on the slope. All of these purposeful warm-up questions do a really good job of getting inside their head and finding out what they're thinking of as they start their day. So we take that and then we combine it with what we see, right? Our movement analysis. So Brandon did a really good presentation on movement analysis 2-3 weeks ago. And then Quinn did one called the challenge of picking an activity, which is once you see something, where are you going to start? So if we combine what their goals are that they've told us, what they are thinking about as they're skiing down the hill, and what we see, that's going to give us a really strong and student-centered place to start our lessons. And that may take a few runs. So it's not something we need to hurry through, because if we want to find out what the best place to start with them is, it's going to take a few runs to get through that process. All right. And so once we've sort of gotten an idea of where we want to start, now we're going to talk about how we want to structure that lesson itself. And we want to use guided discovery as our teaching style. And I really liked this definition that I came up. It says combines structured exploration with strategic questioning. And so there's two parts to that. And we're going to start with the part about the structured exploration. And there were a few things I do want to point out about this. First of all, one of our goals is to give our students permission to make adjustments and report back to us. So whatever we pick, it's going to be something that's going to allow them to do some experimentation on their own. And the second thing is, I want to make it clear that it is okay to explore whatever topic it is, including the wrong way to do things. And the reason I say that is we get really caught up on working towards, I got to fix this, I got to fix that. And that prevents us from allowing people to explore an entire range of things. And I'll use an example, about like, it's okay to explore being forward and being aft on our skis, because in reality, when we talk about directing pressure along the length of the ski, there are times when we want to pressure the tip, and there are times when we want to pressure the tail. And if we don't explore all of those, we end up with people that very much are like, I got to be at the front, always, every moment of the day, always in the front. And that's because somebody's told them, always stay forward, always stay forward. We never explored the whole range of things. So don't get too caught up in this idea of the right way and the wrong way. Just try to explore different ideas under a specific topic. So some ideas to create a sort of guided discovery type of lesson. One idea to set up that structured exploration is to build off of comparisons. You can pick any two variables or more, and let your students compare and contrast those. It could be in parts of a run. It could be over several runs. It could be in parts of a turn. So using the first example I have there, we could do a run that's skiddy and one run that's edgy. We could do some turns that are skiddy and others that are edgy, maybe every other turn. We could start a turn skiddy and end it edgy, and reverse that. So you get the idea that we can pick just a comparison, and then we can start making runs and play with what happens. Some other examples up here were C shapes versus G shapes, pressure at the tip versus the middle versus the tail. Turn, then tip the ski, tip, then turn the ski. Which one works better? Pressuring the boot at 12 o'clock, at 1 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, I don't know, if 6 o'clock. You could try all of those and see what happens. Skiing a hill that looks like a half pipe versus skiing a hill that looks like a caterpillar. All of those are just basically two comparisons that we can use to sort of structure that lesson and let the student experiment. Make sense? All right. Another way we can look at this is to set up challenges. And again, this is kind of coming up with combinations of things. So examples of this would be every fifth turn, you either hop, you ollie, or you whirl. Okay. You need to be skating or stepping or shuffling in all parts of the run. From here to there, 30 turns, now make 60. And so the idea here is we're creating these challenges and we're focusing these on what the ultimate goal for our student is. So for instance, if I wanted to work on somebody's stance and balance, skating, stepping, and shuffling may be really good. And I can let them try all of them in all parts of the turn or the entire run, however I want to mix it up. I'm just finding different ways to challenge their stance. Right? So from here, we kind of get into the lesson itself. We talked a little bit about how we start it, how we structure it, and now we're getting into the lesson itself and where we want to start asking open-ended questions, guiding questions, and reflective questions. So they almost always start with what, where, when, how, why. Guiding question is a question that is used to steer the student's focus on what they are currently doing. So we're working on something. How does your turn shape affect your speed on this pitch? I'm going to ask them to experiment with that right now in the moment. Whereas a reflective question is used to process what happened as we ski down there. And one of the questions I really like is, how can you explain that to another skier? Because it requires them to articulate what they're doing. And then you get to hear what that description is and see if that's sort of matching up with what we want to get them to ultimately do. So we want to work with these two different questions, either guiding questions or reflective questions. And now we're going to go actually to a video. And what I'm going to ask you to do is in the chat, we're going to watch a video that Brandon's going to put up here in a minute. It's a video we watched in the movement analysis last week. And what I want you to do is put in the chat some questions that you could think to ask this skier that would be either guiding or reflective that could help you develop a lesson for them. So we're not so much worried here about what he's doing. Like, we know what he's doing, right? This is a video, a lack of inclination, not many angles, moving to the inside of the turn. We know that. But what question, if this person now skied down to you, could you ask them to start asking about where their focus is? What do you think about when you start your turn? Do you feel imbalance? And I'm actually adding a couple in here too. Do you feel balanced enough or athletic enough in your turns? Do you feel tense anywhere? Do you feel your feet in the bottom of your boots, one or both, and when? How did the ski make contact with the snow? How did that change? Where on your foot do you feel weight? Where are you trying to achieve, or what are you trying to feel or achieve in this run? Do you feel in control of your speed? What ski is the majority of your weight on during the turn? Great. All right, these are all really good examples of the kind of questions that if this skier skied up to us, that we could start to work with them. Right. So our ultimate goal here is for our lesson is to create feedback loops in our lesson. What we don't want to do is jump straight to the correction, and we don't want to give the answer right up front. All right. So something we see a lot, and I'm going to use a person that I skied with recently as an example, is I gave her something to do and watched her come down to me. She skied up, she stopped, and she said, "Was that right?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I saw her do some of the things I asked, but what I told her is I want to know what she experienced. Like, what changed for her? What was different, and honestly, I think she was a little taken aback. It was like she wanted me to give her that reinforcement. But what I wanted to know is what she actually experienced as she skied down there. And in her particular case, she kind of felt some changes, but she wasn't sure. So we made a little bit of an adjustment, and I had her go ski that again, and we did it a couple of more times. And our goal here is to move feedback from external, that question, was that right, to internal. Because at the end of our lesson, we're going to ski away. And if they were relying on us to tell them if they did it or didn't do it, they're not going to be able to find it again once we're gone. So our goal is to help them focus on that internal feedback so that they can start coaching themselves and reproducing what they've learned. So using our earlier video, sorry guys, I want to put my chat up so I can make sure nobody's saying anything. So using our earlier video example, we make some turns, right? That's the task for the movement. We had some turns made, and we had an observation. I see that they're leaning to the inside. They don't have many angles. That's my observation. So I'm going to ask my guiding question. And maybe in this case, I'm going to say, hey, is your inside hip or hand or shoulder, I don't care which one, higher or lower than your outside hip or hand or shoulder in this case? And I'm guiding their focus to a specific thing that I saw. Now, the answer, the first part of this is they may not know because that wasn't their focus. So I may have to do this little optional, retry that task. Okay, I guided you into something, but they may not know because they weren't thinking about that. So let's do some more turns. And I want them to try and identify that particular thing that I saw. And then what I'm hopefully going to get there is I'm going to get that answer from them. Yeah, I noticed that my hand was really low on the inside, maybe my hip and my shoulder, if I'm really lucky out of this. So then once they've identified it in their own skiing and they've answered that, I can make an adjustment. So let's see if we can make the inside hip level with the outside hip as we make a turn. And that could, at this point, involve explaining it to them, showing it, doing a demo for them, and skiing it again. That adjustment may take multiple forms of going through that. But I'm going to make that adjustment, and we're going to ski it again. And after we've done that, I'm going to ask that reflective question. Did you notice a difference between those turns or the earlier ones? And what was that difference, right? I'm going to try to get them to explain to me, did that change anything for you? What was different there? And once we've gotten that answer through our lesson, we're going to keep looping through this feedback. All right, we've learned something there. Let's take a look at what we've got from here. I'm going to make my observation. I'm going to ask that question to try and get them focused on something. We're going to get the answer. We'll make the adjustment. We'll ask that reflective question. And in each time, we're going to just keep looping through. So what I'm trying to do here is avoid this idea of moving directly from observation to correction. That we do that a lot. I saw this, hey, fix that. We don't do the rest of this loop. We want to add this in there so that they start getting the ideas and they start understanding that. We're asking our student to focus, answer based on their experience. All right. Any questions before I keep going through here? Anything? All right. Well, then I will keep going. So our lesson is formatted in these loops. And each time we go through them, we should give that opportunity to have that reflection and that reflective question. But at the end of this, adjusting for talking to children. Yeah, we do obviously some of the questions that I'm asking here, we probably can't ask children, but we might be able, depending on their level and stuff, we might be able to speak in easier terms. Like I probably would not ask a 6-year-old to get their hip and their hips level, right? But I might ask that child, like, hey, is your outside ski heavy and your inside ski light? Or is their inside ski heavy and their outside ski light? And maybe I want to reverse those or something like that. So I might have to get a little bit more basic, but I think that these things can still be done with kids. Anybody wants to debate me on that? I'm willing to discuss that. But I think that all our teaching, even with kids, we're trying to get them to understand the movements. Maybe not at 4, but probably by 7. Right? So eventually we've done these loops a bunch of times. Eventually we sort of spit out the other side, meaning the lesson is ending, the day is ending, and we need to do that full reflection. And the reflection, the reason we do that is because what we are doing is we're turning all those movements into their understanding, right? They reflect on what they just experienced. They move from just doing it to actually understanding it. And so the kind of questions, again, we ask her, what was something new you discovered? What surprised you? Rate that run and why. We're looking for reflective questions on a larger scale of the entire lesson, what they took away from that. All right. And we want to ask them to be specific. Just like we ask them to be specific with their goals at the beginning, we want to ask them to be specific here at the end. So that kind of takes us through the entire lesson, but I'm going to step back and I'm going to mention 2 things about the way we present information. So we know that our students come to us with different ways that they prefer to learn. And we do want to adapt to their needs, but it's been proven that most people are not one type of learner or the other, and that almost all people learn by having all the learning styles. So keep in mind that every time when we're doing those adjustments in that feedback loop, we want to explain it, we want to show it, we want to do it, we want to reflect on it, and we want to kind of get into that every time. We don't want to forget one of those steps because we have learners of all styles, and that's what they need. The second part of presenting information is the use of visualization and metaphors and external cues. Our goal is to give our students leeway to figure out things on their own. And so what we really want to do is give an idea, not a movement. And so there's been some research on external cues that show they're actually more effective than internal cues. And that the difference is that one is focusing on a specific body part and movement, and the other gives a direction of an outcome that our goal is, and we let them figure out how to move their body to make it happen. So some of the examples, think your skis are paintbrushes, leave smooth strokes. Imagine your water running through the bumps, sloshing up on each one. Push down on the snow under your toe piece. Those are all external cues. And I actually, a number of years ago, got this spreadsheet that had a really interesting run of external, internal cues. I pulled some of them out. So like an issue here is like out of balance and the weight is behind the feet. That's the issue. An internal cue is feel the shins on the front of the boots. But the external cue of push, pressure into the snow under the toe pieces is accomplishing essentially the same thing, but we're letting them figure out how to do it. And then we have things like a metaphor, drive your goggles into the wind, or a question after, did you feel you're attacking or you're pulling back? So Brandon, I'm looking, you're 100% learn better by coaching me on what to make or feel the ski do versus what's your body. Yeah. And I think everybody, there are some differences. I actually find that I kind of like internal cues myself, but then sometimes I also like external cues. So I think you can combine them, but it's worth recognizing that sometimes we want to give people a little bit more of that idea of like what we're trying to get them to do, not actually a body movement specific. If you remember back to our very first little thing where we did our stand on one foot, I asked the question, did everybody come up with the exact same answer? And the answer was no, because we're all different. And so we all experience different things. And this is a good example of that. I actually pulled a second example, which was the athletes bent over at the waist. And so we could ask them, lift up your chest or squeeze your belly button. But like an external cue, show me your belt buckle or chest bump, your bud. And then the metaphors were giraffe eating leaves or colliding sumos, which I thought was kind of funny. And do you feel more air resistance on your upper body? So all of those are different ways of explaining and addressing the same exact issue. All right. Oh, before I go there, any questions so far? Any thoughts? I'm reading some of the comments here. Talking about these sensations, asking proper guided questions, getting feedback allows them to start to become better students of the sport and understanding what they are or not. Absolutely. That's exactly what we're going for here. Find out what works for our learners. Ask them to take in the scenery. Yeah, sure. All right. So we are going to sort of finish up here with another little activity that I'm going to ask you guys to participate in. We're going to build up our toolbox here. Since we've talked a lot about this, my goal here is that we are actually going to pull from the chat and put together a document on the end of this. And we're going to send that back out to each other because it's going to give us a good place to start for our off-season stuff. So what I'm going to do is put a skill or a topic up the screen, and I'm going to ask you to use the chat here and to share any one of those questions, comparisons, challenges, cues, visualizations for that topic. I've got 3 different ones, and we'll take a few minutes a piece. We'll put that together, and then, like I said, at the end, we're going to send this back out to everybody, and it'll be a nice document to get started for next year. So we are going to start with stance and balance. And what I want you to do is come up with some of those questions and type them in for us. All right. What foot feels heavier? Are you flat on both feet, standing or in motion? I want you to feel snow running from toes to your heels throughout the turn. Are you grounded? What could you change to reduce chatter on the steeps? Can you lift your toes or your heels? What percentage of your weight is on X foot? Can you change that percentage? That's a cool one. Play with how you stand on your skis. Feet really close, feet really far apart. Feet as wide as your hips. Which one feels best? Where do you feel tension in your legs? What part of the turn do you feel heaviest? Can you bend or unbend your ankles a few degrees without changing anything else? All right. We're going to go to the next one. Our next one is turn shape and speed control. Can you easily arc to a stop at the end of each turn? Can you count to 3 in each turn and have them easy? I like counting in turns. I think that's always a really good one. This one I heard this week in a chat. Ski parts of a circle. I thought that was a really neat description. What happens when you point your skis to the trees at the end of each turn? What happens when you make skis point more towards the bottom of the hill during the turn? Which is faster and slower? Challenge for kids. Can you show me how an animal would do a turn? Pick large animals for large turns and small animals for small turns. Make a higher noise when you move faster and a lower noise when you slow down. Awesome. All right, we are going to go to edge or pressure control. Remember, we're looking for those kind of questions or challenges or comparisons that we can work with in this type of thing. So we want to go beyond just a particular exercise to something that we can allow people to explore with. What happens when you make your turns with straight legs versus flexed? I think I saw that one. Can you skate in a circle in both directions? I love that one. Matter of fact, I had a ski school director back when I first started that made me ski forwards and backwards in figure eights around a flat area. I will say I learned to skate from it. All right, guys, this is great. And this will be a good thing for us to get started with. And I'm going to finish up here with two ideas for the off season that I want to leave you with since we're going into there. One is to build this toolbox. So we're going to get you this list. We'll probably add some more things to it, and I want to send that out to everybody. And add to that list. So think about that over the summer. How can you add to that with questions, comparisons, challenges, and cues based on different topics that you're going to experience with your students. So that's one thing you can work on this summer. Second one is an idea about doing movement analysis on your summer activities. So get good at asking yourself as you're out there doing things, those open-ended questions and answer them. So I'm a big mountain biker, and it's something where I could say, okay, I'm in this rocky area. I could ask my things like, if I ride this, am I better if I'm tall or if I'm short, if I'm stiff or if I'm floaty, if my heels are up or if they're dropped, and what effect all of those things have. So it's an opportunity for me to sort of practice these ideas during the summer, so that I'm ready for next season. And I'm going to leave you with this last little statement here. We talked a ton about questions, and it's really because this kind of coaching isn't about the answers. It's about the questions we use to guide our students to let them come up with the answers themselves. And I think that's that step of taking our teaching from just standing there and telling people what to do, the teaching, to the coaching. And at that point, I want to thank everybody for attending.